The sun filtered softly through the pine trees as I stood on my cedar-stained deck, flipping ribs on the old barrel smoker I'd built myself. My cabin sat on a 5-acre property nestled at the edge of Pine Hollow Ridge, far enough from town to hear nothing but birds and breeze. The smoke curled into the cool mountain air, carrying that rich scent of mesquite and freedom. It was Saturday, my first real day off in 3 months, and I wasn't about to let anything disturb it. The coals hissed beneath the meat. The smell was divine, and a cold sweet tea sat sweating on the railing beside me. I was finally home. What I didn't expect was the storm in heels that came stomping up the trail, her oversized sunglasses glinting like a threat. HOA Karen had arrived, uninvited and furious, like she was marching into a courtroom. "Excuse me," she shouted, waving her phone like a weapon. "This isn't a campground. What do you think you're doing with an open flame this close to the HOA line?" I turned to face her, apron still tied, tongs in hand, ribs sizzling behind me. Karen, real name Marla Simpson, was the president of the Pine Hollow HOA, and had a reputation as loud as her lipstick. She'd harassed more neighbors than wild bears had in this region. "Afternoon," I said calmly. "You're on my land. I own all 5 acres from the ridge down to the creek. The fire pit's permitted, legal, and passed inspection last season." Her jaw clenched like she'd bitten a lemon. "It doesn't matter. It's a fire risk. I'm calling 911. You'll be fined, possibly arrested. You should be grateful I caught this in time." She spun on her heel and started dialing without waiting for a response. I let her go. Karen had a long history of making noise and very little history of backing it up with facts. Still, I stepped inside briefly to grab the permit copy from the drawer, just in case. While inside, I looked through the side window and watched her pace at the edge of my gravel path, talking animatedly. Into her phone, she pointed toward my smoker like she was reporting a drug lab. I rolled my eyes, set the permit on the porch table, and went back to the grill. The ribs weren't going to baste themselves. I'd dealt with HOA meddling before, but Karen had taken it to another level over the past year. First, she tried to block access to the creek, then claimed the private hiking trail I built ran too close to their boundaries. And recently, she'd even paved part of her HOA's overflow parking over the far edge of my land, illegally. 7 minutes later, the crunch of tires on gravel snapped me back to the present. 2 sheriff SUVs rolled up the narrow path toward my cabin. I watched calmly as they parked side by side, lights off, but clearly on duty. Karen rushed up to them like she was reporting a kidnapping. "That's him." She pointed. "He's got open flames near dry brush. The smoke's all over the valley. He refuses to put it out." The 2 deputies, local guys I recognized from town, looked from her to me. Deputy Morales stepped forward. "Afternoon, sir," he said kindly. "Mind if we have a quick chat?" "Not at all," I replied, stepping aside to show the clearly marked fire pit with a stone ring, a sand bucket, and a hose laid out. I handed over the printed permit and fire inspection certificate. Morales scanned them, then chuckled. Karen's face turned purple. "Well, isn't he violating something? It's too close to the HOA perimeter." Deputy Sanders turned to her. "Ma'am, he's well within his rights. This land is outside the HOA jurisdiction. You're actually trespassing right now." She blinked like he'd slapped her. "Trespassing. I came to prevent a fire hazard." "On private land," Sanders confirmed. "With a legal fire pit, a valid permit, and full precautions. You're not authorized to enforce HOA policies outside the HOA boundary," Karen stammered. But it's visible from our ridge. It's disruptive." "Disruptive is subjective," Morales said, "and being visible isn't a crime." She tried again, louder. "This is unacceptable. I'm calling the HOA board. I'll have our lawyer deal with this." I sighed and crossed my arms. "Do you want to talk about legal issues, Karen? Because we should." I walked to the porch and grabbed a thick folder I'd been keeping for just such an occasion. I opened it and showed them a court ruling from 6 months ago, after I'd sued the HOA for encroaching on my land when they paved part of their overflow parking on a section clearly inside my property line. The ruling was in my favor. The judge had ordered the HOA to remove the lot and cease all usage. They ignored it. Now, I had over a dozen HOA cars parked illegally. I handed the file to Morales. "They've had 6 months to comply. I've sent 2 formal notices. If you'd like to enforce something, this is a court order." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her phone slipped slightly in her grip. Morales read the order. His brows lifted. "This is signed and sealed." "Yes," I nodded. "And today, I'm ready to act." Karen turned on me like a lioness. "You wouldn't dare. Those are community vehicles." "On my land," I said coolly, "with a $200 a day storage fee, starting tomorrow." She turned to the deputies. "You're going to let this man, this barbecue man, tow our HOA property. He has a court order," Sanders said, "and you're the one trespassing and escalating." Her hands trembled. "This isn't over. I'll speak to my attorney. You'll regret this." I walked over to my smoker and flipped the ribs again, the scent rising like a victory banner. You're free to leave, ma'am, or you're welcome to stay and enjoy a rib, but either way, I suggest you move your cars fast. Just then, as if on cue, I dialed my towing contractor, a buddy named Glenn who owned half the trucks in the valley. Bring the big rig, I said. It's time. Karen stormed off down the hill, still on the phone, leaving the deputies behind. Morales handed me back the file. We'll stay nearby in case things get messy, but from where we stand, you've handled this like a gentleman. I nodded my thanks and returned to my seat on the porch, finally picking up my tea again. The mountain breeze had returned. Peace was within reach again. But tomorrow would be the real fireworks show. I woke early the next morning, to the distant rumble of engines echoing through the valley. The smell of pine still clung to the cool air as I poured myself a black coffee and stepped out onto the porch. From my cabin's ridge, I could see Glenn's tow trucks winding their way up the dirt road. 3 of them, engines growling like wolves, ready to feast. Glenn, a bear-sized man with a gray beard and a no-nonsense attitude, hopped out of the lead truck. Morning, he grunted. Brought the boys? That HOA lot still on your land. I handed him a copy of the court order. Every inch of it. He nodded, eyes scanning the lot below where nearly a dozen SUVs and 2 golf carts sat like shiny trophies. All right then, let's give them a wake-up call. They won't forget. And with that, the operation began. Down by the lot. Karen was already out, arms crossed, barking at a younger HOA volunteer on a walkie-talkie. Her robe fluttered in the wind as if she were preparing for battle, but when she saw the first flatbed back into position and lower its ramp, her face twisted into panic. She sprinted across the lot like she was trying to defend a castle under siege. Nope, you can't. These are HOA assets. This is criminal. Glenn barely glanced at her. Court says otherwise, lady. The first SUV, a shiny black Range Rover, groaned as it was winched up onto the flatbed. Karen screamed. That belongs to our treasurer. Glenn smirked. Then he should have parked legally. I stood nearby, arms crossed, sipping my coffee. Karen turned to me like I'd betrayed some sacred trust. You're doing this out of spite. No, I said calmly. I'm doing this because you've ignored the law for too long. The sheriff deputies arrived shortly after same 2 as yesterday, just in time to see Glenn's crew securing the second vehicle. Morales shook my hand. You gave them more than enough time, he said. We're just here to keep things civil. Karen practically leapt into his path. This is theft. I want them arrested. Sanders raised a brow. You're free to file a complaint in court, ma'am, but they're executing a legal tow on private land, per court order. Nothing illegal here. Karen's shoulders sagged. For a moment, then she tried a new tactic. We'll pay the fine. Just let us move them. I shook my head. Nope, that ship sailed months ago. You ignored warnings, defied the ruling, and let your board laugh it off. Now you pay the storage and removal fees every day until they're reclaimed. Glenn called out, $200 per day, per vehicle. We take checks. Word spread quickly. By noon, the HOA parking lot was empty. Glenn's team had hauled everything off to his private yard in town, fenced and secure. Karen was nowhere to be seen, probably holed up making frantic calls to board members. I walked the now cleared section of land, brushing my hand over the faint edges of pavement they'd laid over my soil. That night, I lit a small bonfire in the pit again. Peace returned to the mountain deep, satisfying and earned. I leaned back in my old rocking chair, stars glimmering above. What Karen didn't know was that I'd already filed a second suit. One to reclaim back rent for the unauthorized use of my land, 6 months' worth, plus damages. Her HOA attorney would find that letter Monday morning. The wheels of justice didn't move fast, but they rolled heavy when they came. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the HOA board. It was oddly formal, apologetic, and full of legalese. They offered to settle the ongoing case for full payment of towing, storage, and a $25,000 fine. In return, I'd agree not to pursue the rental damages in court. I read it twice, chuckled, then took it to my lawyer. We'll take it, I said, but tell them I want a public apology too. Signed by Karen herself. My lawyer smirked. You really want her to squirm, don't you? I smiled. No, I just want closure. A week later, it arrived, a scanned apology letter with Karen's shaky signature at the bottom. She'd resigned from the HOA board, effective immediately. Word was, she moved to a condo in the city. The mountain had grown too quiet for her, or maybe too honest. Weeks turned into a season. The trees turned gold, the river dropped low, and the smell of snow drifted faintly in the air. But the peace, it remained. My cabin no longer stood at the edge of HOA territory. It stood strong and free, untouched and respected. Hikers passed by on the old trail again, tipping their hats and asking if the ribs were still as good as they remembered. Sometimes, I shared a plate. Sometimes, I just smiled. One day, I even saw Morales hiking with his son. He waved. Still quiet up here. I nodded. Thanks to a little smoke and a lot of patience. He laughed. You showed him how mountain justice works. That's when it really hit me. Some wars are won, not with noise, but with quiet resolve and a good court order. Now, every time I flip ribs on that old smoker, I remember the day Karen called 911 over barbecue. The day she tried to scare me off my own land, with nothing but entitlement and a phone. And I remember the sight of her parking lot crumbling, empty, and finally gone. What started as a quiet weekend turned into a lesson no HOA would forget. When you push the wrong man too far, the mountain pushes back harder, and sometimes, with a tow truck.